I was still in my slippers, a faded pair with bunny ears, sipping my morning coffee and just starting to contemplate the day's crossword puzzle, when the doorbell chimed. A process server stood on my porch, a man in a crisp, unfamiliar uniform, holding a thick, official-looking envelope. "Margaret O'Neill?" he asked, his voice flat and professional. I nodded, my mind still half asleep, thinking it was probably just some junk mail, maybe another credit card offer I'd never open. But then, he handed me the envelope, weighty and ominous, and something about the way he averted his gaze gave me a funny feeling. I tore it open right there, standing on my welcome mat, the morning sun glinting off the legal-sized papers. My eyes scanned the first line, and the words hit me like a physical blow. Petition for guardianship and transfer of estate. My breath hitched. I read it again, slowly, letting the horrifying implications sink in. Guardianship? Transfer of estate? My own son, David, my flesh and blood, was trying to have me declared mentally unfit. He wanted to sell my house out from under me, to seize everything I'd worked my entire life for. In that single gut-wrenching second, the gentle, forgiving mother in me shriveled up and died. She just vanished. And in her place, a warrior I never knew existed roared to life. It was a primal, fierce awakening, born of betrayal and a deep, burning indignation. This wasn't just about property. This was about dignity. This was about a lifetime of love and sacrifice being spat upon. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I wouldn't go down without a fight. Not for a second. People always say a mother's love is bottomless, don't they? A boundless wellspring of affection, forgiveness, and sacrifice. I didn't just hear that adage. I took it literally. I believed it with every fiber of my being, especially when it came to David. He was my world, my only child, and I poured every ounce of myself into him. Looking back, I suppose I took the bottomless part as an invitation to keep pouring, to keep giving, no matter the cost to myself. I remember when David was 8 years old, a skinny kid with a mischievous grin and a fleeting interest in anything shiny. He declared he wanted to learn piano. Oh, the joy that filled my heart. A musical son. Never mind that money was tight. I was working double shifts at the textile mill, the hum and clatter of the looms a constant companion, my fingers aching, my back stiff. But every extra hour, every blister, felt worth it if it meant David could pursue his passion. I scrimped and saved, making sure he had the best lessons, a decent keyboard. He quit after 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The piano gathered dust in the corner, a silent testament to a whim, and to my bottomless, perhaps foolish love. Did I complain? Never. I just told myself he'd find his real passion soon enough. Then came his teenage years, a whirlwind of hormones and questionable decisions. At 16, he totaled my beloved Buick, a sturdy, reliable car that had served me faithfully for years. It was a messy accident, and the insurance barely covered the repairs, let alone a replacement. Any other parent might have grounded him for life, made him work off the debt. But David, with his pleading eyes and earnest promises, convinced me. "Every kid needs wheels, Mom," he'd said, as if it were a universal truth, a basic human right. And I, ever the doting mother, actually co-signed for his next car. It was a sleek, bright red sports car, completely impractical, that he promptly drove like a maniac. I just wanted him to be happy, to fit in, to have all the opportunities I hadn't. College was another saga. 6 years he took to get a degree, hopping from major to major, finding himself, as he put it. And each year, as tuition bills mounted, I found myself at the bank, signing papers for another refinance on my small, comfortable house. 6 refinances. That house, my sanctuary, my nest egg, became a piggy bank for David's extended adolescence. I never complained, though. Not once. Every fleeting smile on his face, every casual, "Thanks, Mom," felt like interest on the debt, a small return on my massive investment of love and resources. I convinced myself that I was building his future, paving his way. When he finally graduated, a moment I honestly thought might never come, I wanted to give him something truly special, something that symbolized the legacy I hoped to pass down. I gifted him the beautiful gold watch his father had worn, the very watch that had been on his wrist the day David was born. It was a precious heirloom, steeped in family history, a piece of his father's memory. He sold it online the very same weekend. Just like that. Gone. Did that sting? Oh, you bet it did. It was a sharp, unexpected jab right to the heart. For a moment, a tiny crack appeared in my bottomless well of forgiveness. But a mother's job, I told myself, is to forgive. It's to understand, to overlook, to keep loving unconditionally. So I swallowed the hurt, rationalized it as him needing quick cash for something important, and kept giving. First month's rent on every new apartment he bounced between, deposits on utilities, groceries when his latest in startup needed all his capital for runway, which usually meant fancy coffees and nights out. My friends, bless their practical hearts, tried to warn me. "Maggie," they'd say, their voices laced with concern, "you're teaching him to bite the hand that feeds." I'd just laugh, waving off their worries with a dismissive hand. "He's my son, not a stray dog," I'd retort, convinced they just didn't understand the sacred bond between a mother and her child. Turns out the dog comparison was unfair. Unfair to the dogs, that is. Most dogs, even strays, show more loyalty and gratitude. Fast forward a few more years, and David was 33. He'd finally settled down, or so I thought. He was married now to Elise, a polite girl, quiet as wallpaper, who always seemed to be gazing at David with a mixture of adoration and apprehension. I liked Elise, though I always felt like I was walking on eggshells around her, never quite sure what she was thinking behind that demure smile. Then came the news that sent me over the moon. They were expecting a grandchild. My heart swelled with a joy so profound it almost eclipsed all the past disappointments. This was a new chapter, a chance to be a grandma, to spoil a little one rotten, to experience the pure, uncomplicated love of a new generation. I immediately offered them the spare bedroom in my house. "It's yours anytime," I'd gushed, picturing nursery colors and tiny clothes. They took me up on it, all right. They stayed 6 months, rent-free, while supposedly house hunting. 6 months. My quiet, peaceful home transformed into a bustling, often chaotic abode. I cooked their meals, cleaned up after them, did their laundry, all without a word of complaint. I was, in essence, an unpaid hotel staff, albeit one who adored her guests. I found myself tiptoeing around, trying not to disturb David's important calls or Elise's nesting naps. I even enjoyed it, in a way, telling myself this was what family did. This was love. One stifling summer night, I couldn't sleep. The air conditioning was on the fritz, and I decided to go down to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I approached the living room, I heard voices, hushed but clear, coming from David's phone call. I paused, not intentionally eavesdropping, but the words drifted out, chilling me to the bone. "Once the old lady signs the trust," David was saying, his voice low and conspiratorial, "we flip the house and move to Scottsdale." My stomach dropped like a stone. The glass of water slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound, though muted, was enough. David froze, phone still glowing against his ear. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and panic. "Who's the old lady?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of unspoken hurt. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. He recovered quickly, a practiced, easy grin spreading across his face. "Just investor talk, Mom. You wouldn't understand." He waved it off, a dismissive flick of his wrist, as if I were a child asking about grown-up business. But I understood perfectly. With a clarity that cut through years of denial and blind affection, I understood everything. I was the old lady, and my son, my beloved son, was planning to flip my house, my home, my legacy. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it stole the air from my lungs. The warrior, who had only just woken, clenched her fists. This wasn't investor talk. This was a declaration of war. The next morning dawned, but it felt less like a new day and more like the grim continuation of a nightmare. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable unease that even Elise's quiet demeanor couldn't mask. David, ever the smooth operator, acted as if nothing had happened. After breakfast, he slid a stack of legal papers across the kitchen table towards me, a casual gesture that belied the venom within. "Standard estate planning, Mom," he announced, his voice oozing with false concern. "Just sign these so if something happens, probate doesn't eat up all your equity. It's for your protection, really." He even managed a reassuring smile, a smile that now felt like a viper's grin. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the documents. My eyes, now sharpened by suspicion, scanned the pages. And there it was, laid out in cold, impersonal legalese. My name, my address, every single one of my assets, all funneled into a revocable trust. And who was named as the sole trustee? David, my son, the man who just last night had referred to me as the old lady and plotted to sell my home. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. This wasn't protection. This was a meticulously crafted trap. This was him trying to legalize his greed, to make his planned exploitation seem like responsible financial planning. I knew, instinctively, that signing these papers would be signing away my independence, my autonomy, my very future. It would be handing him the keys to my life, and he'd lock me out. I stalled, my mind racing for an escape. "Let me run it by my attorney," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel a tremor in my hands. It was a bluff, of course. I didn't have an attorney for estate matters, not yet. His smile cracked, just for a second. The veneer of caring slipped, revealing a flash of irritation, a flicker of entitlement. "Don't you trust your own son?" he asked, the words laced with a familiar, manipulative whine. That line. Oh, that line used to work like a charm. For years, those 5 words were a magic spell that could disarm me, make me question myself, make me give in. But not anymore. The spell was broken. The old blind mother was gone, and the warrior was wide awake, her senses heightened. I tucked the papers into my apron, a deceptively innocent gesture. "Just want to be thorough," I replied, giving him a tight, unreadable smile. Then, without another word, I walked out the door, got into my car, and drove straight to Ruthie Chen's office. Ruthie. Everyone in town knew Ruthie. She was the toughest estate lawyer in the county, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for fighting like a badger. I'd only known her casually from church bake sales, but I knew she was exactly who I needed. Ruthie, a small woman with a surprisingly booming laugh and eyes that missed nothing, listened patiently as I recounted David's scheme, her expression growing sterner with each detail. She took one look at the papers I'd brought, her brow furrowing, and then she whistled, a low, drawn-out sound of disbelief. "Margaret," she said, shaking her head, "this isn't protection. This is a pickpocket with a pen." She explained the devastating implications, how this revocable trust with David as sole trustee would essentially give him control over everything I owned, allowing him to manage, sell, or even liquidate my assets without my consent, all under the guise of estate planning. But Ruthie wasn't just tough. She was brilliant. Together, we drafted a counter-move, a strategic legal offensive. We drew up a new will, one that clearly outlined my wishes, leaving David a specific but not controlling inheritance. Crucially, we established a durable power of attorney, naming Ruthie herself as my agent, ensuring that my financial and medical decisions would be handled by someone I trusted implicitly, should I ever truly become incapacitated. And the pièce de résistance, a letter freezing all my accounts, instructing the bank that no funds could be released, or transactions made unless 2 independent doctors declared me mentally incapacitated. A safeguard that even I, in a moment of weakness, couldn't unilaterally trigger. It was a fortress built on paper, designed to protect me from my own son. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. The knot of fear and betrayal that had tightened in my chest began to loosen, replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. I had taken the first step. I was fighting back. The first thing David noticed, just a few days later, were the changed locks. It was a Saturday morning, and he'd tried to let himself in with his old key, only to find it wouldn't turn. He stood on the porch, fuming, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. I greeted him calmly, a pitcher of freshly squeezed lemonade in my hand, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Oh, the locks?" I asked, as if it were a trivial matter. "Yes, I had a locksmith come by. Just wanted to update things, you know." "Here," I said, handing him a crisp, neatly folded bill. "Here's the locksmith's invoice. Thought you'd want to see it." He went volcanic. "Are you paranoid, Mom? What is wrong with you? I'm trying to help you." His voice rose, echoing in the quiet morning air. He couldn't fathom that I was finally taking control, that I was seeing through his flimsy charade. He saw it as an attack, an irrational act from an aging mother. He immediately roped Elise into his chorus of concern. She stood beside him, her hand instinctively rubbing her gently swelling belly, a silent yet potent sympathy prop. Her eyes, usually so demure, now held a hint of accusation, making me feel like the villain for simply securing my own home. "Mom, David's just worried about you," she murmured, her voice soft, but her meaning clear. "You're being unreasonable." The gaslighting began almost immediately, a subtle, insidious campaign designed to isolate me, to make me doubt my own sanity. My phone started ringing off the hook. Aunt Linda, my sister, called, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "David says you're having spells, Maggie. He's really worried. Maybe it's time to let him handle things before you wander off again." Wander off? I'd never wandered anywhere pricier than the farmer's market. The sheer audacity of it, the calculated fabrication, was astounding. It made my blood boil. That's when I truly understood the playbook. Isolate, stigmatize, seize. First, they try to cut you off from your support system, making it seem like you're the problem. Then, they paint you as unstable, incompetent, unable to care for yourself. And finally, when you're sufficiently weakened and discredited, they swoop in for the kill, seizing control of your assets, your life. I cried that night, but quietly, into the dish towel as I did the dishes. It was a cry of frustration, of deep hurt, of the profound sorrow that comes from realizing your own child sees you as an obstacle, a resource to be plundered. But the tears weren't for self-pity. They were a release, clearing the way for cold, hard resolve. The next day, I walked into the hardware store, my jaw set. I bought a trail camera, one shaped like a birdhouse, easily disguised amongst the foliage in my backyard. If David wanted evidence of my supposed decline, if he wanted to play dirty, then I'd collect mine first. I would be ready. The game had changed. True to form, David didn't waste any time escalating his tactics. 2 weeks after the lock incident, he showed up at my door, not alone this time. Beside him stood a man in a tweed jacket, carrying a slim briefcase. Dr. Patel. His buddy from college, now a psychiatrist apparently. The sight of him, a professional brought in to validate David's manufactured narrative of my mental decline, sent a fresh wave of indignation through me. This wasn't just gaslighting anymore. This was a full frontal assault on my sanity, my very identity. They asked to chat in the living room, a seemingly innocuous request designed to put me at ease. But I wasn't at ease. I was a coiled spring. I remembered my birdhouse camera, discreetly mounted outside the living room window, silently recording every word, every gesture. Let them talk, I thought, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Let them dig their own hole. The chat was an infuriating performance. David, ever the condescending son, translated for me as if I were senile, unable to comprehend or articulate my own thoughts. "Tell the doctor what year it is, Mom," he prompted, a patronizing tone in his voice, as if he were testing a kindergartner. I answered him, of course, clearly and without hesitation, then turned my gaze directly to Dr. Patel, my eyes narrowed. "And Dr. Patel," I asked, my voice cutting through the manufactured pleasantries, "do you bill insurance for house calls, or is this a pro bono character assassination?" Dr. Patel squirmed, visibly uncomfortable. His professional facade cracked, revealing the man beneath, caught between a friend's request and his ethical obligations. He stammered, avoided my gaze, and shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The chat continued for a little longer, a series of increasingly absurd questions, and David's thinly veiled attempts to make me appear confused or forgetful. But I held my ground, answering each question with crisp clarity, refusing to play their game. After they finally left, their mission clearly a failure, I called Ruthie Chen immediately. I told her everything, the visit, the questions, David's performance. "And get that footage," I instructed, my voice firm. The birdhouse recorded it all. Ruthie, ever efficient, subpoenaed the raw footage from my discreet camera. What she uncovered was even more damning than I could have imagined. Turns out, David had promised Dr. Patel a hefty consulting fee from my estate, a fee contingent upon a favorable for David assessment of my mental state. In legalese, as Ruthie delightedly explained, this wasn't just a conflict of interest, it was attempted fraud with a side of medical malpractice. Dr. Patel had crossed a serious ethical and legal line. We served Patel notice first, a stern letter detailing the evidence and the potential consequences for his medical license. He folded like a cheap chair, his professional career hanging in the balance. He quickly signed an affidavit, recanting his findings and admitting to David's undue influence and the promised payment. Score 1 for the old lady. The first major victory, and it felt incredibly sweet. It was a clear sign that I wasn't just fighting, I was winning. With the medical gambit thwarted, I figured public shame, or at least public scrutiny, might be the next logical step to reel David back in. Maybe, just maybe, if his manipulative actions were exposed to the wider family, he'd back down. So, for Thanksgiving that year, I did something I hadn't done in ages. I invited the whole clan, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone who could possibly make it. I wanted witnesses, an audience for the drama I knew was brewing. David, ever the master of superficial gestures, walked in with a bottle of my favorite wine. It was cheap, of course, the kind he probably picked up at the grocery store on the way over. But the gesture, on the surface, seemed to matter. He even tried to play the dutiful son for a while, making small talk, offering to help carve the turkey. I watched him, a tight knot of apprehension and anticipation in my stomach. Halfway through dinner, with the table laden with turkey, stuffing, and all the fixings, and everyone in various stages of post-meal contentment, David stood up. He clinked his glass with a fork, drawing everyone's attention. A hush fell over the room. My heart pounded. I knew this was coming. "As future head of the family trust," he announced, his voice loud and clear, a triumphant smirk on his face, "I want to toast Mom for finally letting go of burdens she can't manage." He raised his glass, expecting everyone to follow suit. Forks froze mid-air. The clinking stopped. A stunned silence descended upon the room. You could practically hear the collective gasp. His words hung in the air, a brazen, public declaration of his intent to control my life, disguised as a benevolent toast. I smiled sweetly, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, but was, I hoped, utterly convincing. Without missing a beat, I reached into my apron pocket. Yes, the same apron that had held his manipulative trust papers, and pulled out a stack of neatly folded documents. These weren't David's papers. These were copies of my new will, the one Ruthie and I had drafted, the one that protected me. Slowly, deliberately, I began to pass them down both sides of the table, like hot rolls being offered to hungry guests. Each relative took a copy, their eyes wide with confusion, then dawning realization as they began to read. David's name appeared exactly 0 times as the sole trustee, or indeed, in any position of power. His inheritance was clearly defined, a modest amount, but nothing that would give him control. The color drained from David's face, then rushed back in a furious crimson. He turned the color of cranberry sauce, his jaw working silently, his eyes blazing with shock and outrage. The carefully constructed facade of the dutiful son crumbled, revealing the entitled, greedy man beneath. Relatives I hadn't seen since his graduation, people who had probably only heard his version of events, suddenly remembered my address, their eyes now full of understanding and a little bit of awe. Whispers rippled through the room. Cousin Ray, a man of few words but sharp observations, caught my eye and gave me a slow, approving nod. David, unable to bear the public humiliation, slammed his hand on the table, scraping his chair back violently. "This is insane!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. He stormed out of the dining room, his face contorted with rage, Elise waddling behind him, her usual quiet demeanor replaced by a look of bewildered panic. Their plates, piled high with untouched turkey and trimmings, sat cooling on the table, a stark symbol of their abruptly curtailed feast. The room exhaled, a collective sigh of relief and vindication. Cousin Ray leaned over and patted my hand, a rough but comforting gesture. "Been waiting years for that brat to get served, Maggie," he muttered, a twinkle in his eye. I didn't enjoy it, not truly. It was heartbreaking to see my son unravel like that. But I won't lie, maybe just a little bit, I did. It was the satisfaction of justice, of finally standing up for myself. David, however, was not one to back down gracefully. The Thanksgiving debacle only fueled his rage, pushing him further into a scorched earth campaign. He escalated his tactics, becoming more desperate, more brazen. My mailbox, once a repository for bills and junk mail, became a target. He'd empty it, hunting for bank statements, utility bills, anything that might give him leverage or information about my finances. It felt like a constant invasion, a violation of my private space, even if it was just a mailbox. I started checking it hourly, retrieving my mail as soon as it arrived, just to deny him the satisfaction. Then came the truly absurd. He called Adult Protective Services, alleging elder neglect. Against whom, you ask? Against me, technically. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He accused me of being unable to care for myself, of neglecting my home, of being a danger to myself, all while living rent-free in my house just weeks prior, benefiting from my care. He was essentially accusing me of neglecting him, the elder he was trying to protect. Investigators from APS arrived, polite but stern, asking probing questions, looking around my perfectly maintained home. They found zero evidence of neglect, of course. What they did find was a well-kept house, a coherent, articulate woman, and plenty of evidence of David's recent presence. The investigators, I could tell, quickly saw through his flimsy accusations, recognizing the clear signs of a family dispute escalating into elder abuse. The whole ordeal was humiliating, but it also solidified my resolve. Each false claim, each desperate attempt to discredit me, became another piece of ammunition for Ruthie. Ruthie, my legal warrior, was not one to let such blatant manipulation go unaddressed. She immediately filed for a restraining order against David, citing his harassment, his attempts to access my mail, and the frivolous APS complaint. She also initiated a civil lawsuit for damages, seeking compensation for the emotional distress and legal fees his actions had caused. It was no longer just about protecting my estate. It was about protecting my peace, my sanity, my right to live unmolested in my own home. To bolster my sense of security, and perhaps as a small act of defiance, I added more security lights around my property. Not just ordinary lights, mind you, but powerful, motion-activated floodlights that could practically land an aircraft. My neighbors, who had quietly observed the escalating drama, started joking that the International Space Station could probably see my roses from orbit. But for the first time in a long time, despite the ongoing battle, I felt safe inside my own bones. The fear that had gnawed at me, the constant anxiety of what David might do next, began to recede. I had boundaries, I had protection, and I had a fierce legal advocate. I was no longer a victim, I was a fortress. The trial date finally arrived. A crisp spring morning, the dogwood trees outside the courthouse blooming like popcorn, their white blossoms a stark contrast to the grim proceedings within. I walked in with Ruthie, my heart a strange mix of trepidation and fierce determination. This was it. The culmination of months of emotional agony and legal maneuvering. David strutted in, looking far too confident for someone about to face serious accusations. He was flanked by a high-priced attorney, a slick, impeccably dressed man who reeked of expensive legal fees. How David was affording this, I wondered. His own disclosure, obtained by Ruthie, revealed the answer. A family loan taken out against my house, a house he hadn't yet stolen, but was clearly banking on. The audacity was breathtaking. Judge Ramirez, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor and sharp intellect, presided. She did not suffer fools, and her stern gaze swept over the courtroom, setting a serious tone. Ruthie opened her case with a masterstroke, the videotape of the psychiatric stunt. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as David's condescending performance, my clear, articulate answers, and Dr. Patel's visible discomfort played out on the screen. The evidence was irrefutable, painting David as a manipulative son, and Dr. Patel as a compromised professional. Ruthie then systematically paraded a mountain of evidence. The bank records showing David's attempts to access my accounts, the forged loan document, the secret trust draft he'd tried to trick me into signing. Each piece built a devastating case against him, meticulously detailing his pattern of financial exploitation and attempted elder abuse. David's lawyer, clearly on the defensive, tried to pivot to sympathy. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice dripping with feigned sorrow. "We have here a struggling son, deeply concerned for his aging." "Objection!" Ruthie barked, cutting him off mid-sentence, her voice like a whip. "Aging is not a synonym for brain-dead, counsel." Judge Ramirez slammed her gavel. "Sustained," she stated, her eyes narrowing at David's attorney. The message was clear. No emotional manipulation would fly in her courtroom. Then, Ruthie presented my original will, the one I had before David's machinations, the one that left him a modest but generous $50,000 for a house down payment. The judge raised an eyebrow, a silent question aimed at David. "You rejected this generosity?" she asked him, her voice quiet but piercing. David, utterly devoid of self-awareness, shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture. "I deserve everything," he muttered, as if it were an undeniable truth. She'd just wasted on bingo. I could have hurled my purse across the courtroom. The sheer arrogance, the contempt, the complete lack of respect for me, his mother, who had sacrificed so much for him. But instead, I sat straighter, my gaze fixed on the judge, a quiet strength radiating from me. I had finally learned not to react to his provocations. Closing arguments took a mere 20 minutes. Ruthie was concise, powerful, and devastating. David's lawyer, with little to work with, floundered. The jury deliberation took an astonishingly swift 12 minutes. It was almost unheard of. The verdict: attempted financial exploitation, damages tripled under state elder abuse statutes, legal fees awarded to me, and a permanent restraining order slapped against David. A complete and utter victory. As officers escorted him past me, his face a mask of bitter resentment, David muttered, "Happy now?" I met his gaze, my own eyes clear and steady. "Happy is a stretch," I answered, my voice calm, unwavering. "But I'm free." And in that moment, I truly felt it. Free from his demands, free from his manipulation, free from the burden of a love that had become a weapon. The aftermath of the trial was swift and definitive. David, reeling from the judgment, had to sell his sports car to pay the awarded damages and legal fees. His dreams of Scottsdale mansions evaporated, replaced by a much harsher reality. I heard through the grapevine that he and Elise moved in with her parents, into a studio apartment, contending with a new baby and a mountain of diaper bills. The irony was not lost on me. He wanted my house to flip, and now he was crammed into a small space, his grand ambitions reduced to the mundane struggles of early parenthood. With the legal battle behind me, I had one last piece of business to attend to: my will. I changed it one final time, a testament to my newfound clarity and resolve. Half of my estate would go to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, a cause close to my heart. The other half, it would establish a college fund for my grandbaby. But with a crucial stipulation: it would only be accessible if the child turned 18, and only if David hadn't touched a single cent of it. It was a way to ensure a future for the innocent, a legacy untainted by greed, and a final, quiet act of protection for a child I might never truly know. Self-respect, I discovered, feels like sunlight on your collarbone. It's a warmth that spreads through you, a quiet confidence that settles deep in your bones. I started to live again, truly live. I returned to my garden, tending to my roses with a renewed sense of purpose. I hosted my book club, discussing novels with friends, my mind finally free from the constant anxieties of David's schemes. I even took a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do. In that class, the only thing I molded was clay, shaping it with my own hands, creating something beautiful and tangible, a stark contrast to the twisted narratives David had tried to mold for me. Some nights, though, I still cry. Quietly, privately. I mourn the boy who used to chase fireflies in the backyard, his laughter echoing in the twilight, the sweet, innocent child who called me Captain Mommy. I mourn the dream of the loving, supportive son I always envisioned. It's a profound, aching grief, a loss that time can't fully erase. But I've learned that grief is just love with nowhere to go. It's the lingering echo of a bond that was, and then was broken. I've learned to let it drift, like clouds across the sky, acknowledging its presence without letting it consume me. It's a part of my story, a testament to the depth of my love, and a reminder of the strength I found when that love was betrayed. If this story lit a fire in you, if it resonated with that quiet strength you didn't know you had, then hit subscribe and ring that bell. More real-life battles of guts over greed, of resilience over betrayal, drop every week. We're here to share stories that empower, that educate, and that remind you that you're not alone. And please, comment below. What would you do if the child you raised, the one you poured your heart and soul into, tried to rob you blind? What lines would you draw? Your story, your perspective, your roadmap might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Margaret's fight wasn't ultimately about a house, or a bank balance, or even a college fund. It was about rewriting a deeply ingrained myth. The myth that loving your child means letting them feast on your bones, that a parent's love must be unconditional to the point of self-destruction. Sometimes, the greatest gift a parent can give, and profoundly, the greatest gift a parent can receive, is the hard-won lesson that love and trust are, unequivocally, two-way streets. They require respect, reciprocity, and boundaries. So, next time someone hints you're too old, too soft, too kind to fight back, too loving to draw a line in the sand, remember the woman in her slippers. Remember Margaret O'Neill, who faced down betrayal with nothing but a ballpoint pen, a fierce legal advocate, and an unyielding fire in her chest. Stand tall, lock your door, call your lawyer, and most importantly, love yourself enough to protect what is yours. Because nobody, not even the child you carried, the child you raised, the child you loved beyond measure, gets to auction your dignity, not on your watch,